This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. I'm Sophie Ikenye. Our top stories. Algeria on the edge as the president faces nationwide protests against his rule. We ask what's next for the country. Home at last. After nearly 6 years in prison, Egyptian photojournalist Show Khan says he's ready to go back to work.
I have no fear to be back to work as a photojournalist because I see it as a sacred job. You reflect the image of people and their concerns, and you become a voice for the voiceless.
Trying to save the northern white rhino, how scientists are using technology as the last hope for reproduction. Also in the program, and the winner is Rwandan director Joel Karekezi, who walks away with the most coveted prize at the closing of FESPACO, one of Africa's largest film festivals.
Surprise, but I made sure I made a film that is able to compete, so I'm really happy and thank you.
And in sports, Uganda named their provisional squad for their final qualifier for the Africa Cup of Nations taking place later this year. Thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. We start in Algeria, where the country is reacting to President Abdelaziz Bouteflika's plans to run for a 5th term in office. The 82-year-old defied protesters with his decision to seek re-election. Tens of thousands of people have been taking part in nationwide protests demanding the ailing leader stands down. In a conciliatory gesture, Mr. Bouteflika says if he wins April's vote, he will call fresh elections that he will not contest. Our North Africa correspondent, Rana Jawad, has the latest.
This was not the moment many Algerians were hoping for. President Abdelaziz Bouteflika's campaign manager arriving at the Constitutional Council to officially hand in the incumbent's bid for a 5th term in office.
A new presidential election will take place, which will be determined by the National Conference. I promise not to run for office in those presidential elections. Those elections are meant to, among other things, guarantee the transition of power under peaceful conditions and in an atmosphere of freedom and transparency. The National Conference will determine the date of the preceding elections.
That letter was seemingly designed to calm the public discontent on display over the last 10 days in cities across the country, including the capital Algiers. Demonstrations of this kind and on this scale are rare in Algeria, and although they lack any clear leadership, they have largely been peaceful. For nearly 2 decades since a brutal civil war between the army and various militant Islamist factions that allowed the military and ruling party to entrench its power, Algerians appeared to take a step back from the politics in the interests of stability. But that stability did not come with the economic prosperity they had hoped for or the freedoms they wanted. So how did Algeria reach this emerging standoff between the people and the ruling elite? The civil war left many fearful of a return to conflict in the event of a political shake-up. President Bouteflika's rise to the presidency in 1999 came with claims of election fraud by the opposition. He was elected again with huge majorities in 2004 and 2009. As protests in Tunisia, Egypt and Libya toppled their longtime leaders in 2011, social problems in Algeria led to riots, but promises of pay rises, housing benefits and other reforms helped to keep Bouteflika in power. A stroke saw the president disappear from the public eye. And since his re-election in 2014, large sections of the public have been left wondering who is really running the country. Announcing his candidacy for the 2019 polls seemed to be the final straw, as Algerians protested in huge numbers. The tens of thousands of Algerians who have been protesting appear to not only be demanding an answer to who rules Algeria, but also an opportunity for a new leader who can deliver the changes they want. Rana Jawad, BBC News.
One person who took part in the process, that's Rania Bancroft, who joins us now from Algiers. Thanks for taking time to talk to us. The president has made some major commitments, so to speak, Are you pacified?
Absolutely not. This was not what we were expecting or hoping for, as you said in the report. We said clearly when we took the streets that we don't want this president any longer. We don't want him to stay for a fifth mandate. So to come out and announce that he will just be here for 1 year and then he won't run again is not enough. Our demands were clear. We don't want him any longer, and we are not going to stop until we have exactly that.
Many people are wondering, though, whether the president will really bow to pressure. Do you truly believe he will?
Actually, I don't think the problem is only with Bouteflika, because there are people that are in backstage controlling everything. We believe Bouteflika is too gravely ill to even make these decisions that they are announcing in his name. So the question really is, will these people make their promises true? I don't think so, because they are very corrupt, and everybody in the country, everybody who took to the streets knows this very well.
You made some allegations there of corruption. I wonder, though, whether you will continue with the protests.
Definitely, we are continuing with the protest. Yesterday, last night, when Bouteflika's candidacy was announced, people went out to the streets. It wasn't very recommended because we don't agree with protests at night. It's not very secure. But indeed, many people, especially university students, went out to express their discontent with the announcement.
Let me come in here and ask what you are presenting as protesters, because no one is clear about who you want, you as protesters, in leadership.
Yes, exactly. The protests did not have any leader or leadership or somebody telling us to go out or to do this or to do that.
But what alternative are you offering? That's the question.
Well, there are many candidates that were going to run, and then their candidacy was refused because of many reasons. For some reason or another, Bouteflika's candidacy was accepted. So we don't actually have a real opposition in Algeria, opposition we can trust, or opposition that offers a transparency, something that our government doesn't offer. So we're not saying that we exactly have the alternative, but what we know of is that we don't want a fifth mandate of Bouteflika. We want change.
So what happens then if the president does not bow to pressure? What is your option?
Well, as I said, this manifestations don't have any leadership, and there isn't a clear plan, which I feel like is a big mistake. We want to have a clear vision of the future, which we don't have that right now, unfortunately.
All right.
But we are keeping it peaceful.
All right. Rania Ben, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts. That's a protester.
Thank you for having me.
Speaking to us from Algiers. Well, joining me is Nahed Abu Zaid from the BBC Arabic. You've heard there, Rania, talking about they will continue with the protests. We today have seen something happen within the regime. We've seen one minister resign. Is it significant?
Let me start by saying what Rania has just said is summarizing the aspirations in the street. The streets scream for leadership, and there's no apparent leadership that is capable of channeling the power, the energy that the streets can provide for change. Back to the question of the minister, Sidi Farouki. Sidi Farouki was not a sitting minister, he was a former agricultural minister. His resignation came today from the party, the FLN, Front National de Libération, and as a legislator as well as a lawmaker from the National Assembly. So that is in itself a significant step, because if people from within the ranks are starting to fall on the sidelines, that is also telling that there is some sort of a power struggle between various camps and various factions inside the establishment, as it were, and that is likely to also gather momentum in the next few days or maybe weeks.
I wonder, though, because people are comparing these protests with the 2011 ones, and then at that time, Mr. Bouteflika did make some concessions. He has made some commitments this time round. Are they significant? Can they change anything, do you think?
There has been all sorts of comparisons made to scare the streets and also to entice them that we are listening, so back off in a way. Some have made the comparison with Syria, others have made the comparisons with the previous decades of violence, as they call them, and now with the previous protests of 2011. Now, I don't think that as you've just heard Rania say, the concessions that he offered are going to appease the streets, because it's gone beyond that, let's put it this way. For the younger generation now, in a country that is awash with natural resources, a country that scores 10 to 12% general unemployment amongst the youth, some talk about between 18 to 20%. And there's also the indirect unemployment, people doing all sorts of unskilled labor just to make a living. So all of that is contributing to the dissatisfaction and the feeling of being disgruntled with the system that Bouteflika has been leading over the last 4 terms, 2 decades.
So that's within the country. How about regionally? Why should anyone care about what's going on in Algeria?
Well, to the untrained eye, Algeria could seem a little bit of an enigma. But if you look deep inside the country, you will find that the country is an association of various allegiances. Some have allegiances to the actual ruling party, others to the Islamists, and even the Islamists have got various factions, others to secularism, not to mention tribalism and the various regional allegiances as well. So Algeria, if law and order falls apart, can get scary. I mean, we've seen what happened with Libya, and believe me, Libya is nothing compared to Algeria. So God willing that the law and order will be preserved in Algeria, because that is not in anybody's interest to let that go down the chaos way.
All right, Nahid Abu Zaid, thank you for your thoughts on this very important subject. Thank you. Now, after nearly 6 years in prison, the award-winning Egyptian photojournalist known as Shokan is free. He was arrested in 2013 while taking photographs at the event that became known as the Rabaa massacre. Now, hundreds of demonstrators died after a sit-in by the Muslim Brotherhood, who were forced out of power in a military coup. Well, the BBC's Sally Nabil caught up with him today after his release. Sally, how is he?
He's extremely happy, but he looked extremely exhausted as well. But he was very happy to be out. And it's not just him, it's also his family. I visited his house 3 years ago when he was still in jail, and his parents were devastated at the time. But today they are over the moon, although all of them look tired, but everyone is extremely happy. And of course, my first question to him when I interviewed him is how it felt like to be free at last.
A feeling I can't describe. It's as if I'm flying, I'm free. I can walk, run, sing or dance.
What was the first thing that came to your mind after your release?
To call my mother, of course, and I called her. This was the first thing I did. I called her once I was out. I have no fear to be back to work as a photojournalist because I see it as a sacred job. You reflect the image of people and their concerns, and you become a voice for the voiceless. It's a duty. The relationship between the photographer and his camera is like that between a father and a daughter. He looks at the camera, takes care of it, and takes photos to express his thought and his art.
Where was he arrested? Just remind us what happened.
He was arrested more than 5 years ago in 2013 when he was covering the dispersal of a sit-in by the supporters of Egypt's former president Mohamed Morsi. He was covering the violent dispersal by security forces, and he was arrested at the time. I asked him, did you ever imagine that it would take you more than 5 years to be out? He said, no, I thought they would release me once they know that I'm a journalist, but that didn't happen to be be the case. He hasn't lost his passion for his profession, apparently, but his mom thinks otherwise. She wants him just to stay next to her. She told me, I don't want him to ever hold a camera again. We've had enough trouble. We don't want to go through this anymore. I just want him to spend the rest of his life next to me. We have seen very dark days over the past years, and apparently she's very scared that he might think about going back to journalism.
All right, Sally Nabil for us there in Cairo. Thank you. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Still to come, sports. He may be the first African to hold a world title in mixed martial arts. And now Nigeria's Kamaru Usman says he wants to give back to his community. I'm Sophie Ikenye, and you're watching Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The top story on this program: Algeria's 82-year-old president Abdelaziz Bouteflika has defied protesters with his decision to seek re-election, despite mass protests against his plans for a fifth term in office. Now, campaigners used the World Wildlife Day at the weekend to warn that many species are endangered and even facing extinction. One of the most urgent cases is the northern white rhino. Now, in central Kenya, the last male northern white rhino, nicknamed Sudan, died in March last year, leaving only 2 females on the planet. And now, scientists are using technology in the fight to save the species. The BBC's Anthony Irungu reports.
At Olpejeta Conservancy in central Kenya, Nayen and her daughter Fatu enjoy a meal under the careful watch of their caregivers.
Anjin, come on!
Oblivious that they are the only surviving members of the northern white rhino and the only hope in saving the subspecies from extinction. Nayen and Fatu are part of a group of 4 who arrived at Olpejeta Conservancy in 2009 from the Czech Republic with the hope that the climate and the rich grassland at the Conservancy would provide a favorable environment for them to breed. The dream, however, did not materialize.
Notwithstanding their age, or particularly Nayen's age, they both have reproductive issues, probably as a result of their long-term incarceration within zoo conditions. And as a result of that, they are both infertile.
With the only surviving male gone, scientists and conservationists are now holding on to one last hope that through artificially assisted reproduction, they can bring back the northern white rhino.
So we expect that maybe by about the month of June, the approval processes should have been cleared, and now we should go to the actual removal, which will now lead again now going back to Europe and to begin to see whether this can be done.
In what has been termed as a highly complicated and sensitive procedure, a group of scientists and multi-government agencies drawn from 4 continents are now putting on the final touches to conduct the first ever in vitro fertilization technique and embryo transfer in northern white rhinos.
We will make an embryo from eggs from these females, and this embryo will be put into a surrogate mother that would be of a southern white rhino origin.
But even as scientists remain optimistic, a number of challenges stand between them and achieving a dream that could reshape the future of this critically endangered species.
What we have to really be careful is that we have to get there in time. So it means that we should get the eggs to laboratory within 24 hours after extraction.
Widespread poaching has brought the northern white rhino to the brink of extinction. Technology may be a way of saving this species, but conservationists warn that unless things change quickly, the whole of the wildlife will be in danger and will be lost for future generations.
For my mind, the importance of the story of the northern white rhinos is more about, it's about them, but it's also about them being ambassadors for the global extinction process that we humans are currently creating. And if that's enough to make people think about changing the way they live and the way in which they interact with the planet, that would be a good thing.
Anthony Irungu, BBC, Nairobi.
You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. Time now for some sport. Peter's back in London with a new look.
Indeed, many thanks, Sophie. Now, we start with women's football, and World Cup-bound South Africa were in action today at the Cyprus Women's Cup. Banyana were beaten 2-1 by the Czech Republic, which means they finished bottom of Group A. Nigeria are currently trailing 1-0 against Belgium. The Super Falcons will need a win to progress to the next round. Now, Uganda have named their squad for their final qualification match for this year's Men's Africa Cup of Nations. The Cranes take on Tanzania later on this month, and head coach Sebastian Desabre named a list of 15 foreign-based players. The coach also released a list of 31 other stars playing in the Uganda Premier League, from which 9 players will be selected after a match in Kampala. 2 players, Hassan Mawanda and Godfrey Walusimbi, who are not attached to any club at the moment, have also been included for training with the locally based players. Athletics now, and Ethiopia's Yomif Kejelcha broke the world indoor mile record on Sunday when he clocked 3 minutes 47 seconds during an invitational meet in Boston. The 21-year-old smashed the 22-year-old record of 3:48.45 set by Morocco's Hicham El Garouj in 1997. Kejelcha had already come within 100th of a second off the record when he clocked 3:48.46 at the Melrose Games in New York last month. The twice world indoor 3,000-meter champion was also targeting the indoor 1,500-meter record, but narrowly missed it with a time of 3:31.25. Now, more history made on Sunday as Nigeria's Kamaru Usman became the first African to win a UFC, or Ultimate Fighting Championship, world champion when he defeated Tyrone Woodley for the welterweight title in a fight which co-headlined the main event at UFC 235. Afterwards, Usman said he would use his present status to better the lot of his people back home.
In my village, where I'm from, they're still not running water. Everywhere. People are still struggling to get clean water. So we're going to put something together. I have an excellent team, a great manager, and we're going to put something together. We're going to start an amazing foundation, and we're really going to change lives.
That's the sport. You've got to love that jacket.
I know. I was about to comment on that. That's fantastic. Thanks. Thanks for the sport. Right now, the Pan-African Film Festival, FESPACO, wrapped up this weekend in Burkina Faso, and the top prize, that's the Golden Stallion of Yenenga, went to Rwandan film director Joel Karekezi. There was also the unveiling of a statue of Thomas Sankara, that's the slain former president of Burkina Faso. The BBC's Victoria Uwankunda was at the closing ceremony.
And it's a wrap from here at FESPACO 2019. And what a night, what a week it's been. The night here ended with the crowning of Rwanda's Joel Karekezi, who won the most coveted prize, the Let Alone the Yenenga, for his movie The Mercy of the Jungle.
A surprise, but I made sure I made a film that, that is able to compete. So I'm really happy, and thank you.
And in front of a packed stadium, Rwanda's President Paul Kagame handed Karekezi his Golden Stallion. Second prize went to Karma by Egyptian Khaled Youssef, while Ben Hamoud of Tunisia won bronze for Fatwa. Earlier in the day here in Ouagadougou, there were scenes of jubilation as the statue of Thomas Sankara, the slain former president of Burkina Faso, was unveiled at the place he was assassinated in 1987. Ghana's former president and a close friend of Sankara, Jerry John Rawlings, was among the hundreds of spectators and dignitaries, including Burkina Faso's president, Roch-Marc Christian Kaboré. The celebrations, bringing the 50th anniversary of FESPACO to a close, saw women win, but none for the top prizes. For FESPACO, cinema-loving Burkinabés and the rest of Africa and beyond, the love for African film continues, and only 2 years away from discovering new names when the next edition of FESPACO rolls out its red carpet again. Victoria Uwankunda, BBC News, Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso.
Well, don't forget you can get in touch with me on Twitter. I'm @CKenya. That's all from the program from me and the rest of the Focus on Africa team. Thanks for your company.